Clinics exposed rats to fluoride to work out its effects on the human brain and the central nervous system.
The pattern that we saw, it typically is what we see with other neurotoxic agents that are well known to cause a hypoactivity or a memory problem or an IQ problem. When I first presented the results of these studies, one of the individuals sitting and listening to the results, he says, "Do you have any idea what you're saying?" And he says, "You're telling us that we're reducing the IQ of children."
Depopulation is why aspartame and many other toxic food additives are allowed to be put in our food. Aspartame is a synthetic sweetener found in many common foods, especially diet products. I have even seen aspartame listed in the ingredients on bags of sugar for sale at Tesco's, a large supermarket chain in the United Kingdom. Why would anyone need to put an artificial sweetener in sugar? Aspartame is a neurotoxin, which affects the entire nervous system. Commercial pilots are considered too impaired to fly if they drink only 2 diet sodas, and yet people are drinking the stuff like water.
You know it as NutraSweet. It's in just about everything. Soft drinks, iced tea, hot chocolate, tabletop sweetener, chewing gum, cereal, pudding, ice cream, cookies, even breath mints and children's vitamins. Odds are, aspartame is part of your diet.
Food scientist Woodrow Monty explains that the aspartame molecule contains a precursor to formaldehyde, methyl alcohol.
In the circulation of the brain and in the veins and arteries of the brain, there's an enzyme that can convert methyl alcohol to formaldehyde, and in the human breast.
Monty says that means an increased risk of breast cancer. This chart shows how breast cancer has risen along with the increased use of aspartame. That conversion into formaldehyde could also mean multiple sclerosis. With MS, the body attacks the nervous system and scars the brain. Plus, this Chinese study found that even extremely low doses of formaldehyde damage the brain's memory proteins.
It can start changing its structure and the way it folds, and start producing strange misformations and malformations, the same kind of malformations that we find in Alzheimer's disease.
After the Food and Drug Administration approved aspartame in 1981, Monty wrote of his concerns that the sweetener might cause cancer, as well as genetic damage and birth defects.
Well, now we do know, and the answer to all 3 of those questions is yes, yes, and yes.
Recently, when leading European researchers found a cancer connection, the government still wouldn't budge. FDA finds no reason to alter its previous conclusion that aspartame is safe as a general-purpose sweetener in food. Yet the International Agency for Research on Cancer now names formaldehyde, produced in the body by aspartame, as definitely causing cancer.
Dr. Olney, do you think that aspartame should be on the market today?
No.
Why not?
Because it hasn't been demonstrated to be safe.
Dr. John Olney is a researcher at Washington University in St. Louis.
I fed aspartame to infant mice and found that it produced the same kind of brain damage that monosodium glutamate causes.
Dr. Olney started studying the effects of aspartame in 1970. He says he was alarmed when the rodents developed brain tumors.
It indicates that if there's an adverse effect, a serious adverse effect in the animals, and if that adverse effect is absolutely proven in the animal research, then it should not be approved for human use.
The consumer needs to tell these manufacturers, we're not going to buy your product until that's taken out, and don't disguise names because we'll find out what they are.
Depopulation is the reason for genetically engineered foods. The alterations in the genome of the food actually cause some genetically modified foods to produce pesticides, and yet people are expected to eat this? Others have been found to damage the internal organs of the rats they were tested on. Considering rats have an immune system far stronger than ours, allowing humans to eat genetically modified foods is nothing less than slow genocide.
cultivation of genetically engineered crops like soy, maize, cotton or canola have far-reaching consequences. 90% of genetically engineered crops belong to the corporate agricultural group Monsanto. The rest are owned by Syngenta, DuPont, Bayer and others. Genetic manipulation of crops can have uncontrollable consequences. The function of genomes is only partially understood, but foreign genes are still introduced into crops. These genetically engineered crops are widely cultivated outdoors, where they cannot be controlled. Currently, 90% of GE cultivation occurs in the Americas, particularly in the USA, Argentina, Brazil, and Canada. It seems researchers have forgotten that genetically engineered crops once outside can no longer be controlled like they could in the lab. GE crops can self-replicate and pass on their new characteristics to neighboring crops, penetrating the fields of farmers who want to cultivate their crops without genetic engineering.
More than 1 million people have now signed a petition calling for a complete ban on the use of genetically modified crops in Europe.
U.S. diplomatic cables released by WikiLeaks revealed the Bush administration drew up ways to retaliate against Europe for refusing to use genetically modified seeds.
The United States government has joined at the hip with Monsanto and pushing GMOs as part of Monsanto's agenda on the rest of the world. And so they were trying to create a strategy to force these countries to accept the first of the genetically modified seeds. Since then, there's been more evidence showing that this genetically modified corn damages mice and rats, etc. It can cause reductions of fertility, smaller litter sizes, smaller offspring, immune responses, etc. And these have gone largely ignored by both the European Food Safety Authority and the United States FDA.
In the U.S., it's forbidden by law to label a product as free from GMO or containing GMO. That we have to thank Father Bush in 1992.
If evil exists, its human form is Monsanto. I don't like to use the word evil because there's just too many religious connotations with the word, but honestly, if evil exists, it is Monsanto. This company is responsible for so much damage that's been done in the world. There's the lovely people that brought us Agent Orange in Vietnam, that Vietnam's still suffering from. There's been so much. The corn that Monsanto produces has just been seen to kill rats, produce organ failure in rats. It's been banned in Germany. It is so shocking. This is changing food on a genetic level. And this is genetically modifying the human race, because when you change the genetic structure of food and you feed it to an animal, it modifies the genetic structure of the animal. And an interesting thing is that if you have a crop of Monsanto corn next to a crop of real corn, the bugs won't eat the Monsanto corn. You've got to ask yourself why. Now, pest-resistant food, if the pests won't eat it, why? That should be a pretty big sign for people. And they're asking you to grow food that nothing else will eat. Why?
And you've got a situation also now where the majority of the corn crop grown in America, and also the majority of the soy crop grown both in America and also internationally, is now genetically modified. And in America, they do not have to label GM foods.
Well, that's the thing. And even 98% of soy is genetically modified. And people go out and they buy these soy products and they say, oh, it's organic soy. Well, here's a newsflash. You can still grow genetically modified food organically. Okay? Doesn't matter if it says organic. Does it say non-GM? That's the thing, you know. And it might say, we stand against GM on the label. It might say, this company is against genetically modified food. But does it say that is non-GM corn? They can stand against genetically modified food but still say, oh, we stand against it, but we have to include it anyway because we can't get anything else. If they don't say non-GM corn or non-GM soy in that product, then it's probably GM, because 98% of soy is GM, and you can still grow it organically, folks. So it doesn't matter if it's organic. You know? And really, there's no such thing as organic food anymore. I've been talking to a friend of mine about this in the last couple of days. The amount of chemical spraying we're seeing here, the amount of chemtrails. I've got a water analysis posted on my website, thecrowhouse.com, that anybody can go and look at. And you look at what's coming down in the rainwater, and this is what is going into all the food. All the crops that are being watered with rain are getting these chemicals on them. So there is really no such thing as organic food anymore.
Depopulation is one of the purposes of the chemtrails, which poison the water, the soil, and even the very air we breathe.
Could a strange substance found by a Southwest Arkansas man be part of a government test? Well, that's the question at the heart of a phenomenon called chemtrails.
People say the government is up there in airplanes spraying all kinds of chemicals to change or manipulate the weather, leaving what you see there, and they call that a chemtrail.
Chemtrails are even mentioned by name in the initial draft of House Bill 2977 back in 2001 under the Space Preservation Act. But the military denies any such program exists. They begin as normal contrails from a jet engine, but do not fade away like a normal contrail. KSLA News 12 had the sample tested at a lab. The results? A high level of barium, 6.8 parts per million, more than 3 times the toxic level set by the EPA.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
You could use barium oxide, for example, which makes big fluffy clouds. You could use tiny little bits of aluminum.
What I found was unusual spiking since the early 1990s in barium, aluminum.
But Rosalind Peterson of California Skywatch says health department records show a sharp increase in both chemicals in the water supply of Northern California, dating from the time the huge contrails first appeared over her home in Mendocino County.
What's the significance of the barium and the aluminum?
I went and got all the tests, and all these things in the same test would be up way over state and federal standards. It had to be airborne, because how could it get to such diverse regions of our county?
Already no shortage of unclassified weather modification programs by the government. But those who fear chemtrails could be secret biological or chemical testing on the public point to the 1977 Senate hearings in particular, which confirmed 239 populated areas had been contaminated with biological agents between 1949 and 1969. Later, the 1994 Rockefeller Report concluded hundreds of thousands of military personnel were also subjected to secret biological experiments over the last 60 years.
Until 9 years ago, the government had the right under U.S. law to conduct secret testing on the American public under specific conditions. Only a public outcry repealed part of that law, with some exceptions.
We're losing more people to prescription drug overdoses in a typical year than to traffic accidents. And if you add...
New research finds pharmaceutical companies devote more dollars to advertising than they do to new drug development.
When taking Lunesta, don't drive or operate machinery until you feel fully awake. Walking, eating, driving, or engaging in other activities while asleep without remembering it the next day have been reported. Abnormal behaviors may include aggressiveness, agitation, hallucinations, or confusion. In depressed patients, worsening of depression, including risk of suicide, may occur. Alcohol may increase these risks. Allergic reactions such as tongue or throat swelling occur rarely and may be fatal. Side effects may include unpleasant taste, headache, dizziness, and morning drowsiness. Ask your doctor if Lunesta...
Allergic reactions such as shortness of breath, swelling of your tongue or throat may occur and in rare cases may be fatal. Side effects may include next-day drowsiness, dizziness, and headache. In patients with depression, worsening of depression, including risk of suicide, may occur. If you experience any of these...
All NSAIDs, including Celebrex, also increase the chance of serious skin reactions or stomach and intestine problems, such as bleeding and ulcers, which can occur without warning and may cause death. With any
People with allergic reactions such as asthma to aspirin or other arthritis medicines should not take Vioxx. In rare cases, serious stomach problems such as bleeding can occur without warning. Tell your doctor if you have liver or kidney problems. For more information, Vioxx. Vioxx.
An important message from Parker and Wakeman for people who have taken the prescription drug Vioxx. The manufacturer of Vioxx has recently pulled this popular arthritis drug from the market over health concerns. Recent studies show users of Vioxx may suffer heart attacks, strokes, and even sudden cardiac death. If you've taken Vioxx...
Headache, diarrhea, indigestion, and rash would explain muscle pain or weakness.
Priapism, an erection lasting more than 4 hours.
Serious stomach problems such as bleeding can occur without warning.
Unusual changes in mood or behavior or thoughts of suicide.
Fatal.
Death.
The pharmaceutical companies are practicing a campaign of slow genocide by foisting poisonous vaccines and medications on an unsuspecting public. Many common vaccines include ingredients such as mercury, aluminum sulfate, live